Nice and warm. EC, welcome. All right, let's get it going. Song has ended. I think I want to keep that, Michelle, in our future webinars. That's nice. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining on a Monday morning. We hope you're doing well. I'm Sarah from the Institute for Mixed Methods Research. I'm joined by Dr. Michelle Salmona, the president of the Institute.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Couple housekeeping things. So we do have the chat turned on for everyone, so you can communicate with each other in there. If you have any formal questions about the content, please put them in the formal Q&A, because we'll itemize those, and any questions we don't get to during the webinar, we will collect and send questions afterwards in the follow-up email. You will also receive a recording of this webinar. So throw your questions in. Once we get going in Dedoose, so we're going to spend the first 20 minutes or so talking more on a conceptual level about descriptors, terminology that you're going to see in Dedoose, and we're going to talk about this concept of a data catalog. Once we go into Dedoose, things may go pretty quickly. Just a reminder, it's being recorded, and we're also going to send you follow-up resources. So if you get overwhelmed, especially if it's your first time with descriptors, just know that that's normal, and we will guide you through and send you some follow-up resources. If you could put in the chat, do you have experience with descriptors? Have you used descriptors in your work before?
Experience with Dedoose would be helpful too. First time.
No. New user, okay.
So we have a lot of new users to Dedoose. Okay.
Okay, so if it's your first time, this is good information to know. We'll also send you a getting started webinar in our follow-up recording or follow-up email. So if you do feel overwhelmed today, because we're not going to go over, you know, some of those foundations of Dedoose, we're going to focus on descriptors today. Alrighty, what do you say, Michelle? Let's get going.
Let's get started.
Let's dive in. Descriptors on a Monday. Oh, one more reminder. We run a Dedoose 101 workshop. Our next cohort is in September. We'll send you the link so I can throw those in the chat for you. Or Michelle, if you want to just throw our website in the chat for folks. We also run a Bring Your Own Data research camp, which is much more intensive than the Dedoose 101 workshop. It's 4 weeks. We actually progress your work, much more interactive as well. So check out those if you end up liking Michelle and I after today. Okay, so descriptors in Dedoose, let's talk about why you would use them in the first place. So descriptors are basically any categorical, quantitative, or demographic data that are tied to pieces of media. So your qualitative data in the system. Most often people are using these to track any demographic data that they're interested in comparing, you know, across their study. Perhaps you have like a research site that you want to compare or do any relational analysis on. Also, any quant data, any survey data, any Likert scale questions, all of those would be categorized as descriptors as well. Time, pre-post study, that would be another great example of a descriptor. What these allow you to do is really in-depth comparisons, and you can ask specific questions of your data. So if you want to know, did experiences of my participants vary by gender or race? Or if you did want to do a pre-post study, I interviewed Sarah at the beginning of the year and at the end of the year. I wonder if things changed. These are great tools to use.
I would like to add in something for the beginning, which is to say that you don't need to use descriptors in Dedoose. If you're doing a qualitative study, you can use Dedoose quite well without using descriptors at all. I've done so myself. As a qualitative researcher, I find descriptors intimidating, constraining, difficult to work with, overwhelming, a whole lot of different ways of describing how descriptors feel as a qualitative researcher. But you might want to try, say, 2 or 3 descriptors. You might want to try to have, say, gender to start with, and maybe age range or location, or just 2 or 3 small types of things that can actually then allow you to delve into your data analysis in different ways. So don't feel you have to use descriptors, but if you do use descriptors, it does make Dedoose more powerful.
It really opens up a lot of the data display, data visualization options. Side note, you can also use these for project management purposes. I'll send you a resource on that. I don't want to distract us too much today, but if you had a research team and you wanted to assign media files to specific people, because descriptors attached to media, you can do that through descriptors as well. So by setting up your descriptors, you can create a profile. Let's roll with the example of you're interviewing people. So your unit of study are people, a person. You can create a profile for them with all information that is analytically important to your study. So you would have a descriptor profile for each participant in your study. Quick example up here, this person's name or their pseudonym is Kasima. Age is important to us, race is important to us, and what sport they played in college is important to us. So this would make up Kasima's descriptor profile that we can then link to her interview.
The tricky bit about this is to be clear what your unit of analysis is in your study. So, for example, often it's a person or a group of people. It could also be, or an organization might be your unit of analysis. It's whatever is of interest to the social science problem that you're investigating. So in this case, we've got the unit of analysis is the person, the group of people, but it could be a process itself might be a unit of analysis in different locations, for example. So descriptors being set up to analyze your unit of analysis will focus, each unit of analysis would have, each instance of unit of analysis would have a profile. And in this case, we're talking about each of the 10 participants, one profile for each participant.
Another concept you'll see once we go into Dedoose is this of a descriptor set. So this is really just a container that contains all of your descriptor fields. So what we've been talking about, race, gender, age, those would be your fields.
I often think of it as a spreadsheet. So if you just go back to the slide for just a minute, the idea of, if you think of listing your descriptors in a spreadsheet, the spreadsheet itself would be the descriptor set. The column heading would be each of the descriptors, and the rows themselves would be the profiles. That's the way I like to visualize, and it helps me a lot. So I'll take you through this one. In this case, we have a study that has 3 different units of analysis. The study is interested at looking at the school district itself. It's also separately looking at the schools, the individual schools, and also the students. So in this case, this Dedoose project would have 3 distinct descriptor sets, one for each unit of analysis. However, it makes things complicated if you have things in separate descriptor sets. So for instance, if you're only interested in the student, but you want to know what school they go to and some information about the school district in which they study, you would create one descriptor set relating to the student, and you might have some columns relating to the school where they went, if it's a large school or a small school, and the school district in the same spreadsheet. So you can look at it in different ways, depending. It always comes back to the focus of your study. What is it that you're trying to get at? And so I'm losing my voice here. Descriptors need a lot of upfront thinking. You need to spend some time before you start working with descriptors in Dedoose. I like a whiteboard. playing around with what elements of interest around your unit of analysis might help you in your study. And from that, you can start building out what your descriptor set might look like.
Often we recommend limiting it to one descriptor set because it makes other features in Dedoose easier to use. And often you really only need one descriptor set. Dedoose comes with a default one in there so that you don't even have to think about it. You can just go straight into your descriptor fields. But if you ever have a huge case study, that's when maybe you would think, if you, oh, I have multiple units of study, multiple units of analysis here with many descriptor fields associated with each of them, then you would think about adding another descriptor set to your project. And we'll show you where this is in Dedoose in a second. Alrighty, so here's what Michelle was referencing earlier. This is my digital recreation of a whiteboard, yes. So thinking about my unit of analysis, as we were talking about earlier, these are people, specifically college athletes in the example we'll be using today. And then we're interested in specific things from these people, right? So we're interested in race, gender, career status, so whether they were an athlete or former athlete, what division they played in, and what sport they played. So you would only want to add information that was actually relevant to your analysis. So like in this example so far, we don't care about their age. It wasn't analytically important, so we don't have it here.
But again, the good thing about working with descriptors is if it becomes important, you can easily add it in later.
Absolutely. So often if you're dealing with, if your unit of analysis is a person, you'll often have maybe pre-screening data or, consent form data to see if they were eligible for this study. Some of that data you might be interested in. So in this case, race, gender, career status, all of this was self-reported from participants and was important for the study. So we kind of knew this going in. We set up the study to have this information. You can also add descriptors later on in your study. So if I decided, oh, there was something coming up in the study that they were all talking about where I need to know class size for each person, average class size, then you could always add that later. It's not a one and done thing. Very flexible. So this is just getting us closer to the spreadsheet view. So again, folks self-reported all of this information. Our descriptor fields are running across the top, race, gender, career status, so on. And the field options, the values, are underneath. And then we'll transform this once more into a spreadsheet. And this is the data catalog that we're going to encourage you all to create in your own studies. So the first column is an identifier of some sort. In this case, I went with participant pseudonyms. And then each row will eventually turn into their descriptor profile. So each row is that participant and their information. And so we have 20 rows here, 20 participants.
One thing that's important here to notice that if you don't have data for a particular player, you need to think about what to put in that. I would usually put in not supplied or something, so something consistent, so that as you're looking at the data later, you get a sense of how many were supplied and how many weren't supplied, rather than just blank.
By creating this spreadsheet, you can upload this into Dedoose, and Dedoose will create the descriptor fields for you, populate all the options. It will also create a descriptor profile for each person. So this is why we recommend using the spreadsheet method, and we'll demonstrate it for you today. Really increases the efficiency of the process. Some people like to do it manually. I used to be that way. So we'll show you how to do it manually today as well.
I think if you do it in a spreadsheet like this, you're better with consistency and making sure spelling and everything's checked before you put it in manually. It can be quite easy to make mistakes, I think, manually. So
yeah,
but you can add things manually later, certainly.
Then I want to map on some Dedoose terminology to this example here. So this is just a zoomed in view of these descriptor profiles. Again, these top level header columns, these are descriptor fields. So name, gender, race, career status, sport. Each row is going to turn into a full descriptor profile. And then lastly, this whole thing will be contained into one descriptor set. We're keeping everything in one set. People tell us in the chat, you hanging with us? Don't see many questions in the Q&A, let us know. Don't want to go on to dynamic descriptors until I get a reaction from someone that we're still, okay, all good, thank you.
All good.
All right, so there's also this concept of dynamic descriptors. These can be tricky for some folks. Usually you would have
we get a lot of questions about these.
very few of these in your project. So it's not like you would go in and make every descriptor dynamic. So these are appropriate when you have at least 2 pieces of media per participant, and one of those pieces of media represents a change in one of the descriptor field options. So for example, I have 10 participants and I interviewed them at 3 different times. Analytically, it was important to track those changes between those different time points. And so then it would be appropriate. Okay, I need a dynamic field and I'm going to name it interview stage. And then the options would be first interview, second interview, third interview. If this study was lasting a long time and we decided, you know what, the age of participants is really important as well, and age may change for each of these 10 participants during the course of the study, then by all means, you know, age would be a dynamic descriptor as well. So if anything is going to change about the base descriptor profile, that would alert you that, oh, okay, this is a dynamic descriptor. Michelle, what would you say?
Another creative way I've seen people use dynamic descriptors is through a process. So for example, looking at people trying to become citizens in the US, they go through different stages. So any data that you collected about their application would be put with their profile, but attached to dynamic descriptor stage application. And then when they move to interview or green card or the different stages, you would collect data at that different point and create a different dynamic descriptor for that separate stage right the way through until they were granted citizenship. So it's really a powerful tool if you need to use it.
Mm-hmm. And again, we'll go through an example of that today.
Oh, there's a question about if you've got focus groups. I think focus groups are different. There's different ways of handling focus groups. As one piece of media attaches to one descriptor, the way I usually handle focus groups, if I know who's talking when, is I might create, if there's 5 people in the focus group, 5 copies of that focus group, and one would be focus group for Peter, one would be focus group for Ben, one would be focus group for Jane, and then I would just excerpt where each of those people were speaking within their own version of the focus group, and that would then become attached to them.
No, we had another question.
Yeah.
If we only have cross-sectional data, could dynamic descriptor only one point in time?
If all your data, there's no dynamic descriptors if your data is connected at one time.
Yeah, if you have just one interview with someone, then there would be no dynamic descriptors in your study because you don't have another piece of data coming in. And so, yeah, maybe this will make sense once we do the example in Dedoose as well. But really good clarifying question there. Yeah, if you don't have multiple pieces of data, you will not have dynamic descriptors. All right, so here's an example. If we decided to switch up that previous example of a college athlete and we added interview stage and age, those 2 highlighted in green there would be dynamic descriptors, and then the other 3 would stay constant. All right, let's go into Dedoose and start making sense of this within the actual program. I also want to note you can add multiple pieces of data to one descriptor profile. So if you interviewed Michelle and I had Michelle create a picture of her experience along with the interview, I could upload both pieces of those data and assign both of those pieces of data to her profile. No problem there. That's not related to dynamic descriptors in any way. Alrighty, showing Dedoose now, hopefully.
Yes.
Okay, so here we are in a project where we have 16 pieces of media, have some codes here on the side. I want to start off going into the descriptor workspace and talk about some of the terminology that we referenced earlier. So you'll see in the upper left, this is where you have your descriptor sets. And again, you'll see that Dedoose comes with that default set so that you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. Set fields is just below that. This is where you could manually add different descriptor categories if you wanted to. So race, gender, age, time of interview, all of those would be different fields. And then over here on the right, this is where your descriptor profiles will populate once you import them or once you create them. So right now I'm going to import that spreadsheet. I'm also going to put that spreadsheet in the chat for you so that you have the actual example. So I'm not going to share the spreadsheet. There we go. And I'm going to put in a throat lozenge. I too am losing my voice. Okay. We should be sponsored, Michelle. We should have some sort of sponsorship. Our voices always go out so much. Okay, so I'm going to go to the home screen here. I'm going to hit import data and I'm going to import that descriptor profile data catalog. That will help Dedoose create all of these for me. Double click on that Excel sheet. No errors, great. So now I can go back to
I would recommend, however, if you're doing this in your own project, that you test it in a blank project first, just to make sure it comes in clean. And that way, if you find any errors, you can fix it before you import it into your actual project. So just to repeat it, you just go to the home page, go import spreadsheet, import data, select spreadsheet, go and find it, and it'll just bring it in for you.
So now I'm going to go back to our descriptors workspace. I imported that, the data is in here, but you'll see that we don't have anything populated on this right side. That's because in this columns area, wherever you see a columns panel, this is dictating what you view in the database to the right of it. So because nothing is selected here, it's just not displaying the data to me, even though it is in there. So I'm going to hit check all. That's just a tip. If that ever happens to you and you think, oh my God, my data's gone. Nope. Just make sure that all those columns are checked for you. So let's run through this again. Descriptor sets, it imported into the default descriptor set. Awesome, no problem there. If we go below to fields, we see all of the correct fields listed. So name, gender, race, career status, sport, and division. And then over here on the right, we see a descriptor profile for each person. So for instance, Eliza here up top, if I double click that, it's going to bring up Eliza's full descriptor profile. It's also going to show what documents, what pieces of media are linked to Eliza's profile. We don't have that yet. We're going to go through how to link data to these profiles in 1 second. So each of these profiles is just replicating what was coming in from that data catalog. So everything was done correctly here. If you wanted to go through and add a new one, we'll spend more time on this in a second, but you can just hit that add field. Again, you can mix and match techniques. So if you want to import some and then later you need to add new, you can do both. Alrighty, as far as linking these profiles to their media or linking to these profiles, a couple different ways you can do that. First off, if you wanted to stay in this descriptor workspace, you can do it from here. So you're going to see a column called linked media. If I click on this 0, and in fact, let's do it for, we can stick with Eliza. If I click on 0, it's going to show me every piece of media in my project. So it's going to ask, what piece of data would you like to link to this profile? So here I have Eliza. Let's just go Eliza stage 1 and hit link. So now that piece of data is linked to Eliza's profile. If there were other data points in here that I wanted to link, I could just go through and hit link on all of them. So let me do another.
Eliza might have an interview transcript, an image.
Yep.
She might have done some artifact in the interview. There might be something about her from a website. All of those can be linked to her profile in the descriptor set.
Let's do another one here. So we have Janelle. I'm going to click on that 0. Pull up all pieces of data that we have. You can always sort on these column titles. And then we have Janelle right here. So I'm going to hit link. So that's one technique to link data to your descriptor profiles. Another one is through your media workspace. So when you go to your media workspace, you're going to see a column called descriptors. The ones that we've already linked have a 1 next to them, representing one descriptor profile is linked. If we needed to link Aaliyah's document, for instance, I think Aaliyah's in here. We can go ahead and click on that 0, and then Dedoose is just going to show us all descriptor profiles in the project, so we can link the correct one. And here's Aaliyah. Hit link, boom, you're good to go. So those are 2 different manual techniques to link your data to the descriptor profile.
It's an important point to remember that there's always different ways of doing the same thing in Dedoose. So it's often good just to have a bit of an explore and see how things work.
It also depends on how much data you have in the system. So if you have, 50 interview participants, then I would start looking into this auto link feature. Heck, even if you have 10 and you don't want to sit here and click multiple times, know that you do have this auto link feature available to you. We'll send you a link. In fact, I can grab it right now in a moment. You can use this auto link feature to tell Dedoose, hey, I have a descriptor column for you that corresponds to the media column title in my media workspace. And so please go off and link these for me so that I don't have to do it manually. There's a trick to this.
Exactly though.
Yeah, they have to match exactly. So we'll send you, it's a quick 2-minute video showing you how to make sure that those match exactly so that you can use this feature. Alrighty, pausing to check the chat in the Q&A.
I'm keeping an eye on it. Adding a new descriptor field.
What would be the best way to do this at this point?
Okay, well, how do you get the media into Dedoose in the first place is something we're not covering today, because but we'll send you resources to show you how to get media into Dedoose, which is sort of an introduction to Dedoose webinar. The 2 names that need to match are the name of the descriptor profile and the name of the document itself in the media. So those names have to match. So for instance, elia.docx would have to be in the first column of the of the spreadsheet for it to actually auto link. And we'll come to dynamic descriptors in a minute. So we'll get to there. And we'll also be adding a new descriptor field shortly. So we'll come to that one shortly too.
And for those who are asking more questions about the auto link feature, I just put that link in the chat for you. We'll also follow up in the email with that link. All right, yeah, so let's get to that question of, hey, we want to add a new descriptor field here. So how would we go about doing that? So let's go ahead and add, Michelle, what do you say we make this a dynamic field? 2 birds, 1 stone?
Let's just do a straight one first, and then we'll do a dynamic one shortly. Let's do my favorite option list.
Age?
age, we have the age range, so it's
Okay.
optional.
Let's go age range. You're going to see a field type here. If you click on that drop-down menu, you're going to see 4 different options. We recommend, in most cases, to keep it an option list because this gives you the most control over what you see in the data visualizations. So you can really dictate what you're seeing here. Text is good for pseudonyms or anything that you want to type in directly. Number, if you want to run quantitative analysis on one of your descriptors, then it would need to be a number. But you'll see here with age range, we are not choosing number because we want full control over the data visualizations and how we disaggregate the data. So we're going to keep it an option list. Date and time, also recommend switching that to an option list to give you more control. So here we're going to keep it an option list, and then down below, this is where you would add different options. So let's go 18 to 20 and then click add. Go 21 to 23.
While Sarah's doing that, I just wanted to say that I really like using option lists as my preferred choice because it means that you're going to not get spelling mistakes, for example, if you're using a text file, a text list, or if you're using a number field, you could put in the wrong type of number, where if it's actually an option, you have to pick one of the options that you create so that you know you're going to have some better consistency. So my recommendation would be always pick an option list as your first, but if it's not going to work, then pick one of the others.
So I added those 3 options. I'm going to click submit, and then you'll see that we have age range here. With any of these in your set fields panel, you can always double click them if you needed to add more options. For example, if we had got a new participant that played a different sport that wasn't listed, we could come in here and just add another option. Age range, if I double click that, you're going to see what I just input there. You can always rename these as well, delete them, add more, and you can also reorder them. So now we also see we have age range in our descriptor profiles and it's blank for everyone. If I wanted to just quickly manually assign this, so let me click on Eliza's profile. I'm just going to double click, and then I can populate age range and hit submit. And then there was a question in the chat for how do I, link I believe it was an image to a profile. So I would go to that piece of data in your media workspace, hit the descriptors under 0, and then choose what descriptor profile it should be attributed to. So here I can link it to Ari's profile. And you can do that for as many data sources that pertain to Ari. Again, that's not related to dynamic descriptors.
So each piece of media can only be attached to one descriptor, but you can attach multiple pieces of media to the same descriptor. It's a one-to-many relationship.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty, now let's go through and add a dynamic descriptor. Let's go with that example that we were doing earlier, where we have interviewed the same participants at different time points. So here, if I go to my media workspace, I have an Ari interview stage 1. So this represents the first interview. And then we have stage 2. And then you'll see with a couple other participants, we have stage 1, 2, and 3. So we'll need a dynamic descriptor if we want to be able to compare between these different stages. So I'm going to go back to our descriptors, click add field. One thing to note is dynamic descriptors, currently they have to be added and linked manually because of the complicated relationship that they have in the system to media. So here, let's do interview stage. I'm going to keep it an option list, but I'm going to check this dynamic field here. And then let's go stage 1, stage 2, and 3. So I find the most intuitive way to attach dynamic descriptors is actually through your media workspace so that you keep track of what pieces of media you've linked, because you have to do it manually anyway. So here we have RE interview stage 1. So when I click this 0, Dedoose is going to ask, what is the base descriptor profile that this piece of data should be linked to? In this case, it's RE. So I'm going to hit link to RE. And then on the back end, Dedoose is going to say, okay, what dynamic field is this piece of media corresponding to? So in this case, it is the stage 1 interview. And I can hit submit. So now that individual piece of media is linked to the broad profile of RE, but distinguished by the interview stage of stage 1. So now I can do that for RE stage 2 as well. So I'm going to click that 0. It's the same base profile. So we have RE, I'm going to hit link, and then interview stage, this one is stage 2, and hit submit. And what this allows you to do, it allows you to go to your data visualizations, your code times descriptor chart, for example, and select interview stage as the axis to disaggregate your data on. So you'd be able to see where there are changes by different interview stages.
It's an important point to think about the focus of your study. So when you're sort of setting up your study design and you're deciding on what your purpose and focus of your study is, that drives the whole process. It drives how you're going to dive into your data and analyze it to answer the research questions, which answer your central research problem. And all of that actually drives the design about whether you'll need things like dynamic descriptors or what the unit of analysis is. So clarity around the focus of your study is really important.
And then we'll also send a specific resource on focus group data, but I want to read this question from the Q&A here. You've already coded your focus group transcripts, but have not added descriptors yet. So yes, you can still add descriptors to coded data. In your case with focus groups, you just go ahead, Michelle.
The way I read that question is that they haven't made multiple copies. They've just copied one. They've just coded one focus group. So they wouldn't be able to add descriptors to that focus group.
And I'm saying you can add descriptors as long as it corresponds to that group as a whole. So if you divided up your focus groups by gender, for instance, and gender was something important in your study that you wanted to compare, if you had a focus group of all women, yes, you can add a descriptor, you know, field gender, and then women to that whole focus group.
Location. Organization, where the focus group was. So you would have to add descriptors at the focus group level if you've coded one transcript.
But if you wanted to draw out individual differences in those focus groups, you will need a copy for each person, and you would want to treat it almost like an individual interview where you're only coding, you know, my responses in that specific focus group. But yes, we will send you more detailed resources on that after. Okay, I also wanted to go through a couple different options here. If you add more data as you go, or if you want to create a descriptor profile on the fly without importing it. So a couple different ways to do that. If you go back to your descriptors workspace, and let's say we added a new participant here, and I need a new descriptor profile for them. One way to do that is to click on the little addition icon in the upper right. So add new descriptor. And you're going to see all of those descriptor field categories populate, and we can choose which data corresponds to this participant.
You can see how option lists are easier to work with.
Yeah. And then hit submit. And then you'll see, okay, we have a new descriptor profile here for Zach, and we can start linking data to that profile.
Notice the icon that Sarah used with a circle with a plus sign. you'll find that throughout Dedoose. You've become very familiar with that as an icon. It's adding anything in different places. It's that one, and the canoe with the up arrow is your export icon, and the canoe with the down arrow is your import icon. So it's good to become familiar with the icons and find your way through.
And I'm going to use that addition icon right now to add what we're going to call Zach's interview data. So I'm going to add data from the media workspace here. I'm going to hit create a blank document just for this example. Call it Zach and fake content so that we can see that we have a piece of media for Zach. And now we could hit that descriptor 0 and choose Zach's profile up here. Now, let's say that you have a brand new participant and they don't have a descriptor profile yet. Let's use Michelle. She's not feeling very creative today, I guess. So here we have Michelle, a new interview participant, and we don't have a descriptor profile for her yet. You can create a profile and link it to the piece of media at the same time. So if I go to Michelle, this is the interview, and I click on that 0 under descriptors. Again, Dedoose is going to present all current descriptor profiles to you. We don't have a Michelle in here. So I'm going to hit create and link descriptor. So this is going to create a new descriptor profile and link it to that document all in one action. So Michelle, you played soccer and you were great. A star.
Very good.
Hit submit.
And I'm only 25. Lovely.
This is your stage 1 interview. So now we have a new descriptor profile in the system for Michelle, and we linked her interview all at the same time. So if we go to our descriptors, we'll see Michelle's profile there as well.
So for those of you that are new to Dedoose and getting a bit sort of blown away by the quickness of all of this, what we're simply doing here is the descriptors live in the descriptor workspace. The media, which is what Dedoose calls data, I don't know why, live in the media workspace. And all we're doing is we're connecting different pieces of media, different pieces of data to descriptor profiles in the descriptor workspace, just going backwards and forwards between the two.
And again, descriptors are really, really powerful when it comes to your different analysis charts. And so let me hop over to a fully coded data set so that you can appreciate what descriptors allow you to do here. So if I go to my Analyze workspace, this is the chart I was speaking about earlier, your code times descriptor chart, where it allows you from this drop-down menu to choose what you want to disaggregate your codes by. So in this case, if, hey, we want to know, were there experiences influenced by gender or sexism, you know, whatever we're analyzing here. So if I choose gender, you'll see each of our codes, so abusive or hostile conditions is a code, and it's going to be disaggregated by the descriptor field options. So in this case, women were talking about hostile conditions much more than men. All of these charts are also linked to the qualitative data behind them. So if I click on this little bar, you're going to see all of the qualitative data behind it.
Can you go back to the descriptor workspace and show everyone how to reorder the fields?
Oh, yes.
In the bottom left-hand column.
So if you want to reorder to make sure, for instance, if we wanted career status to be in front of gender in our database here, it's a misleading icon. So you're going to see the reorder fields icon. It's that little circular icon here. And then this is where you can influence the order. So if I wanted to move...
This can be very helpful with the different visuals that come out. If you want to change the way they look, you can reorder the fields.
So I put career status farther up, and then you can hit submit. And then you'll see that changed in our database over here as well. I want to show you one more powerful chart, though there are many. the descriptor field times code grid chart. This allows you to build your own chart. So really, really helpful, especially when you want to ask specific questions. So let's say we want to add gender to this chart. I'm going to click on gender and hit add field. And then you can choose what codes you want to visualize here, and Dedoose will automatically start populating it for you. So we have a breakdown of women and men, and then there's the specific coding on your project. You can
Don't be misled by the numbers in such charts. It's important to see that it kind of gives you an idea of what to investigate. It's a heat map, so the closer to red it is, I guess, the higher the number. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's more important, because as with any qualitative research, absence can be just as important as presence. So if there's nothing there, that could be just as important. So it's always important to investigate the data sitting behind the charts.
Mm-hmm. And I really like this one because you can add more descriptor fields as you go. So if you wanted to do a more intersectional analysis, you could add race to this chart, and it's going to give you a breakdown of that specific code disaggregated by the descriptor fields that you chose. You'll also have the option to view your descriptor data as a whole via the descriptor ratios multi-chart. I'm going to switch this to a bar chart because it's easier for my brain to handle here. So this is going to give you
a chart girl all the way.
Your pie chart, yeah.
All the way.
I got burnt out. Got burnt out on pie charts. So here it's going to give you a breakdown of your descriptor profile data.
And we're not getting into filtering today, but you can use these charts to actually create subsets of your data. But that's under filtering, which is for another day.
And to the question, will the recording be shared? Yes, the recording will be shared along with links to specific resources and guides that we've been referencing throughout. So all in all today, start with your unit of analysis and build out, like Michelle was saying, on a whiteboard, on a Post-it note, what you're interested in about your unit of analysis, and that will build out your fields. Highly recommend creating a data catalog, because again, you can just import that and Dedoose will create these profiles for you. And then you'll think about which technique you want to use to link your qualitative data to these descriptor profiles. If you have multiple pieces of data for a participant, no problem. You can link all of them to the same profile. If you have a descriptor category that may change for a participant over the course of the study, that's when you would want to think, okay, is this a dynamic descriptor? That's when you would use that feature. All right, I'm going to stop.
Do you have any questions?
Here and look at the chat.
I know we've covered a lot, and all we're doing today is just talking about descriptors. So we didn't cover charts, analyzing, filtering. There's a lot more to do for advanced Dedoose work, but that was just to get you started with descriptors.
The other thing I would like to note, if you have survey data, pretty much everything we discussed today does not pertain to you because Dedoose takes care of it all for you. If you have survey data with open-ended qualitative data embedded within it, keep it all in the same spreadsheet, upload it. Dedoose will create the descriptor fields, create the profiles, and link it to your data all at the same time. You don't have to go through that linking process. So I'm going to put some links in the chat for you. We will also share these with you in the follow-up email. But one of these links is a reference to survey data. So if you did have survey data, this is what you can use here.
Okay, so there's a few questions. Someone's asking about a session on Thursday, which I'm not sure about. Someone else is asking if there's more seminars like this on other topics. Nothing planned at the moment, but we can always.
So yeah, if you want to arrange a capacity building training with Michelle and I, You'll have my information from that follow-up email. You can also go to our website and check out our offerings.
This is another question. Yeah. The Learning Center for people who are asking for advice on charts and analysis, go to the Dedoose Learning Center.
Yep. So those links that I threw in the chat for you will take you to the Learning Center, and then you can go to the data visualization portion. If anyone was asking about a webinar on Thursday, Dedoose does intro webinars for folks with the Dedoose support team. So that's when that would be referenced. Michelle, I think we should have an encore presentation again with a different topic. Folks seem to find this helpful. So if you stay connected to the follow-up email that I send you, just respond back with keep me informed on future webinars, and we'll make sure to send you the link.
We're getting a lot of questions about focus groups. I think there's been some confusion. What I was talking about was if you have a focus group with 5 people in the focus group, I would create 5 copies of that focus group. I would name one for each person, and then if I went into the focus group for Ben, I would create an excerpt for everything Ben said within that focus group, and that is what I would code. I would only code anything Ben said in that focus group. Anything in Jane's version, I would only code anything that Jane said. That way I can then attach Jane's descriptor to Jane's set portion of the focus group, and so on. I don't delete anything. I still keep everything else there for context. But if you're unclear how to create an excerpt, which is one of the fundamental elements of Dedoose and coding, hopefully Sarah can point you in the right direction in the Learning Center.
Yep. I went and put that link in the chat for everyone. All right, we're going to stick around for the last 5 minutes or so if you have more questions. Otherwise, thank you for joining us. You'll be receiving the link to the recording along with some resources. Let's say by tomorrow afternoon at the latest.
Or by the end of the week. By the end of the week.
Yes, have a wonderful week, everyone. Thank you, thank you.
And we should tell you about the Dedoose textbook too. If anybody's interested, there's the Dedoose textbook that you can always get a copy of if that helps you. There
we go. Going out. Some good vibes. Looking at the Q&A. I think we covered all.
Someone's put their hand up. I don't know who that is.